You know that feeling when your ex calls you boring, and then you end up dating her best friend? Yeah, that's basically my life right now. So my girlfriend Sarah dumped me last month because apparently I was too predictable and never did anything exciting. She told me I was like watching paint dry and that she needed someone with more spark. I was pretty crushed about it, honestly. But then her best friend Jenna started texting me to check how I was doing. At first I thought she was just being nice, but then we started hanging out and I realized she actually got me in ways Sarah never did. Now we're together, and Sarah found out at a party last weekend. Let me just say the drama that followed was definitely not boring. So I'm Alex, 28M, IT specialist. I work at this mid-sized tech company downtown doing network maintenance and system updates. Pretty standard stuff, but I actually enjoy the problem-solving aspect of it. My coworkers are decent, and my boss is pretty chill as long as everything runs smoothly. I'd been dating Sarah for about 8 months before everything went sideways. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue and hit it off pretty well initially. She was outgoing and social, while I'm more of a quiet type who likes staying in with Netflix or working on side projects. I thought we balanced each other out, but apparently she saw it differently. The thing is, I never considered myself boring. I mean, sure, I'm not the type to go bungee jumping or plan spontaneous road trips to Vegas, but I have interests and hobbies. I build computers in my spare time, and I'm really into photography. I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends, and I can hold my own in conversations about pretty much anything. But Sarah always seemed to want more excitement and adventure than I was naturally inclined toward. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. She'd make comments about how we never did anything fun or how all my friends were just as boring as me. She started going out with her girlfriends more often and would come home talking about all these exciting people she'd met. I tried to plan more interesting dates, but nothing seemed to satisfy her need for constant stimulation and novelty. The breakup happened on a Tuesday evening at Sarah's apartment. I'd gone over after work thinking we were just going to order takeout and watch a movie like we usually did. She had this weird energy when I walked in, though, like she was amped up about something, but also nervous. I settled onto her couch and asked how her day went. She told me it was fine, but she seemed distracted. I suggested we order from that Thai place we both liked, but she said she wasn't really hungry. That should have been my first clue something was off because Sarah was always hungry. We sat there in awkward silence for a few minutes while she scrolled through her phone. I asked if everything was okay, and that's when she put her phone down and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen before. It was like she'd made up her mind about something and was steeling herself to go through with it. She told me we needed to talk about our relationship. My stomach immediately dropped because nothing good ever starts with those words. I asked what was wrong, and she launched into this whole speech about how we weren't compatible and how she needed someone who could match her energy. She said I was too comfortable with routine and never wanted to try new things. She told me that dating me felt like being stuck in the same day over and over again. Then she said the thing that really stung, that I was boring and predictable, and she felt like she was wasting her youth being with someone who had no sense of adventure. I tried to defend myself and pointed out all the times I'd gone along with her ideas for activities I wasn't particularly interested in. I reminded her about the salsa dancing classes and the rock climbing gym and that weekend camping trip that I'd organized specifically because she said she wanted to do more outdoor stuff. But she just shook her head and said those were exceptions and that my default mode was boring. She told me she'd been thinking about this for weeks and had even talked to her friends about it. Apparently, they all agreed that we weren't a good match and that she deserved someone more exciting. The whole conversation felt surreal. I kept thinking this had to be some kind of test, or that she was having a bad day and taking it out on me. But she was completely serious. She said she'd already made up her mind, and that trying to change my personality wasn't fair to either of us. I asked if there was someone else, and she said no, but the way she hesitated made me wonder. She insisted it wasn't about another guy, but about her needing to figure out what she really wanted in life. She said she was 26 and felt like she was settling for safe instead of going after what would actually make her happy. The worst part was how calm and matter-of-fact she was about the whole thing, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. I asked if we could work on it together, but she said her mind was made up. She told me I was a good guy, but that good wasn't enough anymore. I left her apartment feeling completely blindsided. 8 months together, and she dumps me because I'm too boring. I drove home in a daze wondering what the hell had just happened, and whether she was right about me being predictable and dull. The first few days after the breakup were pretty rough. I kept replaying the conversation, and wondering if I really was as boring as Sarah claimed. I threw myself into work and tried not to think about it, but everything reminded me of her. Then on Friday morning I got a text from Jenna, who was Sarah's best friend. She asked how I was holding up and said she'd heard about the breakup. I was surprised she was reaching out since I figured Sarah's friends would automatically take her side and probably avoid me. I texted back that I was doing okay and thanked her for checking on me. She said she was sorry things didn't work out and that breakups were always hard regardless of the circumstances. It was a simple exchange, but it felt genuine, like she actually cared about my well-being. Over the next few days, Jenna kept texting me. Nothing heavy or inappropriate, just casual check-ins and funny memes to cheer me up. She'd send me articles about tech stuff she knew I'd find interesting or pictures of dogs from the shelter where I volunteered. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful gesture that Sarah never bothered with. I started looking forward to Jenna's messages. She had this way of making me feel heard and understood that I'd never experienced with Sarah. When I mentioned feeling like maybe I really was boring, Jenna told me that was ridiculous and that there was nothing wrong with being thoughtful and reliable. She said Sarah had always been the type who got bored easily and needed constant stimulation. Jenna told me that wasn't a character flaw on my part, but just a compatibility issue. She pointed out that plenty of people valued stability and depth over constant excitement and adventure. The more we texted, the more I realized how much I enjoyed talking to Jenna. She was funny and insightful in ways I'd never noticed when she was just Sarah's friend in the background. She asked thoughtful questions about my work and actually listened to my answers instead of just waiting for her turn to talk. One evening, she sent me a long message about how she'd always thought I was interesting and that Sarah didn't appreciate what she had. She said she'd watched me at parties and group hangouts and noticed how I could have deep conversations with anyone about anything. She told me that kind of emotional intelligence was rare and valuable. I found myself staying up late texting with Jenna about everything from work drama to childhood memories to random philosophical questions. The conversations flowed naturally, and I felt more understood in those few days than I had in months with Sarah. It started to dawn on me that maybe the problem wasn't that I was boring, but that Sarah and I just weren't right for each other. Jenna seemed to appreciate all the things about me that Sarah found tedious. She thought my photography was cool and wanted to see my latest computer build. She asked about the animals at the shelter and remembered details from previous conversations. By the end of the week, I realized I was developing feelings for Jenna that went beyond gratitude for her support. The thought scared me because of the obvious complications, but I couldn't deny the connection we'd formed through all those late-night conversations. The following Tuesday, Jenna suggested we meet for coffee to talk in person instead of just texting. I was nervous about it because I wasn't sure if she meant it as friends or something more. Part of me worried I was reading too much into her messages and that she was just being a good friend during a difficult time. We met at this little cafe near downtown that I'd never been to before. Jenna was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. She'd remembered that I liked mine black with just a little sugar, which was such a small detail, but it meant a lot. She looked different somehow, or maybe I was just seeing her in a new light. She was wearing this blue sweater that brought out her eyes and had her hair down instead of in the ponytail she usually wore around Sarah. I realized I'd never really looked at her as anything other than Sarah's friend before. We started with small talk about work and the weather, but there was an underlying tension that hadn't been there in our text conversations. I could tell she was nervous too, which was oddly comforting. At least I wasn't the only one feeling uncertain about where this was heading. After about 20 minutes of dancing around the obvious, I decided to be direct. I told her I really appreciated her support after the breakup, and that talking to her had helped me more than she probably realized. I said I was starting to have feelings that went beyond friendship, but I didn't want to make things weird between us. Jenna looked down at her coffee cup and was quiet for a long moment. I started to panic, thinking I'd completely misread the situation and was about to apologize when she looked up and smiled. She told me she was relieved I'd brought it up because she'd been feeling the same way but wasn't sure how to address it. She said she'd always found me attractive and interesting, but had never acted on it because of Sarah. She told me that watching Sarah take me for granted had been frustrating because she could see qualities in me that Sarah seemed to overlook completely. Jenna admitted she'd had a crush on me for months, but had pushed those feelings aside out of loyalty to Sarah. She said the breakup had been hard for her too because she'd wanted to reach out and comfort me, but wasn't sure if it would be appropriate given the circumstances. She told me she'd always admired how thoughtful and genuine I was. She said most guys she dated were all flash and no substance, but I was the opposite. She appreciated that I actually listened when people talked and remembered important details about their lives. The conversation shifted to lighter topics after that initial confession. We talked about our favorite movies and books, shared embarrassing childhood stories, and discovered we had more in common than either of us had realized. She was into hiking and nature photography, which aligned perfectly with my interest in outdoor photography. We ended up staying at the cafe for over 3 hours, long past the point where we'd finished our coffee. The staff started giving us looks, but we were too engrossed in conversation to care. It felt natural and easy in a way that my relationship with Sarah never had. When we finally decided to leave, Jenna asked if I wanted to go for a walk in the park nearby. We strolled along the paths talking about everything and nothing, and I felt more relaxed and happy than I had in months. There was something about being with her that just felt right. As we were walking back to our cars, Jenna stopped and turned to face me. She said she knew the situation was complicated because of Sarah, but she wanted to see where things could go between us. She asked if I felt the same way. I told her I absolutely did, but that I was worried about the drama it might cause. Jenna said she understood the concerns, but that she didn't want to miss out on something potentially amazing because of fear about other people's reactions. Over the next week, Jenna and I started spending more time together. We were trying to keep things low-key while we figured out our feelings, but it was getting harder to hide how much we enjoyed each other's company. We'd meet for lunch during work hours or go for evening walks in different neighborhoods where we were less likely to run into people we knew. The problem was that our mutual friends started noticing we were both less available for group activities. When people asked where I was, Jenna would make excuses, and when they asked about her, I'd do the same. It was creating a pattern that was bound to be noticed eventually. Sarah had been pretty quiet on social media since our breakup, but she started posting more frequently that week. Nothing direct, but lots of cryptic quotes about moving on and finding yourself after toxic relationships. I try not to read too much into it, but some of the posts felt like subtle digs at me. Then on Thursday, one of our mutual friends posted pictures from a group dinner that both Sarah and I had skipped. Sarah commented asking where everyone's favorite people were, with a bunch of question mark emojis. Someone replied that they'd invited both of us, but we were both busy with other plans. That's when Sarah started paying closer attention. She began liking and commenting on Jenna's posts more frequently, and I noticed she was viewing my Instagram stories within minutes of me posting them. It felt like she was monitoring our activity for some reason. The situation got more complicated on Friday when another friend mentioned that they'd seen Jenna and me having coffee together earlier in the week. They asked if we were hanging out more since the breakup, and I gave some vague answer about her being supportive during a difficult time. But word got back to Sarah somehow, because she started posting more pointed content about people who couldn't be trusted and friends who showed their true colors when relationships ended. The posts were vague enough that she could deny they were about anyone specific, but the timing made it pretty obvious. Jenna was getting frustrated with having to sneak around and hide our developing relationship. She said it felt juvenile and that we weren't doing anything wrong by dating each other. She pointed out that Sarah had been the one to end things with me and that she didn't get to dictate who I could see afterward. I agreed with her in principle, but I was worried about the fallout. Sarah could be vindictive when she felt wronged, and I didn't want Jenna to lose her oldest friend because of me. I suggested we take things slow and wait a few more weeks before making anything public. But keeping secrets was taking its toll on both of us. We couldn't post pictures together or check in at the same places on social media. We had to coordinate our stories when friends asked about our plans. It was exhausting, and it was starting to affect how natural and easy our relationship felt. The breaking point came over the weekend when Sarah posted a story about fake friends and people who stab you in the back. She included a poll asking her followers if they thought it was okay to date your friend's ex immediately after a breakup. The results were mixed, but it was clearly a passive-aggressive way of testing public opinion. Jenna saw the post and was furious. She said Sarah was being manipulative and trying to control the narrative before she even knew what was actually happening between us. She wanted to confront Sarah directly and get everything out in the open. I convinced her to wait until we could think through the best approach, but I could tell Jenna was reaching her limit with the secrecy and drama. She said she cared about me too much to keep pretending we were just friends, regardless of how Sarah might react. That Sunday evening, Jenna came over to my apartment, so we could talk privately without worrying about being seen together in public. She seemed tense when she arrived, and I could tell the stress of hiding our relationship was getting to her more than she'd been letting on. We ordered pizza and tried to have a normal evening, but the elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Finally, Jenna brought up Sarah's social media posts and said she was tired of feeling like we were doing something wrong when we weren't. She told me she understood my concerns about the drama, but she said living in fear of Sarah's reaction was giving Sarah power over our lives that she didn't deserve. Jenna pointed out that Sarah had made her choice when she broke up with me, and that choice didn't include getting to control who I dated afterward. I admitted I was scared of being judged by our friend group. I said I didn't want people to think I was the type of guy who would immediately rebound with his ex's best friend, even though that wasn't really what had happened. Our connection had developed naturally over time, not as some kind of revenge plot. Jenna sat down next to me on the couch and took my hands. She told me she didn't care what other people thought because she knew the truth about how we'd gotten together. She said the people who mattered would understand, and the ones who didn't probably weren't worth worrying about anyway. She reminded me of all the conversations we'd had about feeling understood and appreciated. She said what we had was real and valuable, and she didn't want to lose it because we were afraid of other people's opinions. She asked me if I was willing to fight for what we had or if I was going to let fear win. I looked at her sitting there being so brave and honest about her feelings, and I realized she was right. I'd spent 8 months with Sarah feeling like I wasn't good enough, and now I had someone who saw all my best qualities and appreciated them. Why was I letting Sarah's potential reaction dictate my happiness? I told Jenna that I cared about her too much to keep hiding our relationship. I said I was ready to deal with whatever drama came our way because being with her was worth it. She smiled and said she was glad because she was falling in love with me and didn't want to keep that a secret anymore. We spent the rest of the evening talking about how to handle the inevitable confrontation with Sarah and our friend group. Jenna suggested we start by telling a few close friends individually so they'd hear our side of the story first. She said once people understood how our relationship had developed, most of them would be supportive. I agreed that honesty was the best approach, even if it meant dealing with some uncomfortable conversations. We decided to start being more open about spending time together and let people draw their own conclusions. If anyone asked directly, we'd be honest about our feelings for each other. Jenna stayed over that night, and for the first time since we'd started getting close, I felt completely relaxed about our relationship. No more sneaking around or coordinating alibis. We were going to be together openly and deal with whatever consequences came our way. The next morning, Jenna posted a picture of the sunrise from my apartment window with a caption about new beginnings. It wasn't explicitly about us, but anyone who knew her well would recognize that she wasn't at her own place. It felt like the first step toward being honest about our relationship. I commented on the photo with a heart emoji, which was small but significant given that we'd been avoiding any public interaction on social media. Within an hour, several people had liked my comment, including a few who probably suspected something was developing between us. The following weekend, our friend group had planned a house party at Mike's place. It was one of those regular gatherings we'd all been going to for months, and both Sarah and I were expected to be there. Jenna and I decided it would be the perfect opportunity to make our relationship public in a natural setting. I was nervous about seeing Sarah for the first time since the breakup, especially with Jenna by my side. We'd agreed to arrive separately and then find each other once we'd both gotten settled. It seemed like the most diplomatic approach given the potential for drama. I got to the party first and immediately felt the awkwardness of being the newly single guy at a couples-heavy event. A few people asked how I was doing post-breakup, and I gave generic answers about focusing on myself and staying busy with work. Everyone was being nice, but I could tell they weren't sure how to navigate the situation. Sarah arrived about 30 minutes later with a couple of her girlfriends I didn't know very well. She looked good and seemed to be in a great mood, laughing loudly and making a point of talking to everyone except me. It was clear she was putting on a show of being completely over our relationship. When Jenna showed up, she made her rounds saying hello to everyone before eventually making her way over to where I was standing by the kitchen. She gave me a quick hug that lasted just a second longer than a friendly greeting, and I could feel people starting to pay attention to our interaction. We tried to play it casual at first, talking to other people and mingling separately, but we kept gravitating toward each other throughout the evening, and I noticed several people watching us with curious expressions. It was becoming obvious that something was different about our dynamic. The turning point came when someone started a game of beer pong and Jenna asked if I wanted to be her partner. It was an innocent enough request, but the way she smiled at me and the comfortable way we worked together made it clear we'd been spending a lot of time together recently. We were actually doing pretty well in the game, laughing and high-fiving after good shots. I caught Sarah watching us from across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't exactly anger, but it definitely wasn't happiness either. After we won our second game, Jenna spontaneously hugged me and kissed my cheek in celebration. It was a brief moment, but it was clearly more than friendly affection. The room got noticeably quieter, and I saw several people exchange glances. Sarah appeared at my elbow almost immediately. She asked if she could talk to me privately, and her tone made it clear it wasn't really a request. Jenna squeezed my hand supportively and told me she'd be right there when I got back. Sarah led me out to the back patio where it was quieter. She asked what was going on between Jenna and me, and I decided there was no point in lying anymore. I told her we'd been spending time together and had developed feelings for each other. Her reaction was immediate and intense. She accused me of using her best friend to get back at her for the breakup. She said it was pathetic and manipulative, and that I was trying to hurt her by going after the person closest to her. I tried to explain that it hadn't happened that way, but she wasn't interested in hearing my side of the story. She said I was proving her point about being boring and predictable by immediately latching onto the first person who showed me attention. The conversation escalated quickly, with Sarah raising her voice and attracting attention from other party guests. People started gathering near the patio doors to see what was happening, which made everything feel even more dramatic and uncomfortable. The confrontation on the patio was getting heated, and I could see people inside the house starting to stare. Sarah was getting louder and more accusatory, claiming I was deliberately trying to hurt her by pursuing her best friend. I kept trying to explain that our relationship had developed naturally, but she wasn't listening. That's when Jenna appeared at the patio door. She'd obviously heard Sarah's raised voice and decided she needed to intervene. She walked over and stood next to me, which seemed to infuriate Sarah even more. Sarah immediately turned her anger toward Jenna, accusing her of being a terrible friend and going behind her back. She said she couldn't believe Jenna would betray their friendship for a guy, especially a guy she'd just dumped for being boring and predictable. Jenna stayed calm at first and tried to reason with Sarah. She said she understood why Sarah was upset, but that she and I hadn't planned for this to happen. She explained that they'd started talking after the breakup and had realized they had a genuine connection. But Sarah wasn't interested in explanations. She said Jenna had violated girl code by pursuing her ex so soon after the breakup. She accused Jenna of pretending to be supportive while secretly trying to steal her boyfriend, even though she'd been the one to end the relationship. The argument attracted more attention, and soon most of the party guests were either on the patio or pressed against the windows watching the drama unfold. I felt terrible that our personal business was becoming public entertainment, but there was no way to de-escalate the situation. Sarah started bringing up private details about our relationship, telling everyone how I'd been clingy and boring and that she'd done me a favor by ending things. She said Jenna was welcome to deal with my lack of ambition and excitement, since she clearly had low standards. That's when Jenna finally lost her patience. She told Sarah she was being cruel and unfair, and that just because their relationship hadn't worked out didn't give her the right to trash me publicly. Jenna said Sarah's behavior was proving that she'd made the right choice in ending things. Jenna pointed out that Sarah had been the one to break up with me, so she didn't get to be angry about who I dated afterward. She said Sarah was being hypocritical and manipulative by trying to control the situation after walking away from it. The confrontation reached a peak when Sarah accused Jenna of being jealous of their relationship and plotting to steal me from the beginning. She said Jenna had always been the friend who got the leftovers, and that this was just another example of her settling for second best. Jenna's response was swift and decisive. She said she wasn't settling for anything and that she genuinely cared about me in ways Sarah never had. She told Sarah that maybe if she'd appreciated what she had, she wouldn't be standing there alone while other people found happiness. The crowd of onlookers was getting uncomfortable with how personal and vicious the argument had become. A few people tried to intervene and suggest everyone take a break, but Sarah was too worked up to listen to reason. She started making threats about telling everyone what kind of person I really was and how Jenna would regret getting involved with me. She said she had stories that would change how people saw both of us, though she was vague about what those stories might be. The party atmosphere had completely shifted from fun and relaxed to tense and uncomfortable. Most people were either trying to mediate or looking for excuses to leave early. Mike, whose house it was, finally stepped in and suggested we all take this conversation somewhere more private. But Sarah was beyond reasoning at that point. She said she didn't need privacy to tell the truth about what kind of people Jenna and I really were. She started making accusations about how I'd been emotionally manipulative during our relationship and how Jenna had been plotting against her for months. None of what she was saying was true, but she was saying it loudly and confidently in front of all our mutual friends. I could see some people starting to look at me differently, wondering if there was truth to her claims. It was exactly the kind of public humiliation I'd been afraid of. Jenna tried to defend both of us, but Sarah kept talking over her and making increasingly wild accusations. She claimed I'd been controlling and jealous, and that Jenna had been feeding me information about her personal life to help me manipulate her. The breaking point came when Sarah accused us of having an affair during our relationship. She said she'd suspected something was going on for weeks before the breakup, and that's why she'd ended things. It was a complete lie, but it was the kind of accusation that would stick in people's minds regardless of the truth. I finally found my voice and told Sarah she was lying and that she knew it. I said she was making up stories because she couldn't handle the fact that I'd moved on and found someone who actually appreciated me. I pointed out that she'd been the one to call me boring and end our relationship. That's when Jenna stepped forward and made the declaration that changed everything. She told Sarah and everyone else at the party that she was in love with me and wasn't going to apologize for it. She said Sarah had thrown away something good, and she wasn't going to make the same mistake. The patio went completely silent. Jenna's public declaration of love was unexpected and powerful, and it shifted the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Instead of looking like we were sneaking around behind Sarah's back, it became clear that we had genuine feelings for each other. Jenna continued by saying she'd watched Sarah take me for granted for months and had seen how unhappy I was in that relationship. She said she'd never acted on her feelings while I was with Sarah, but she wasn't going to hide them anymore now that I was free. She told Sarah that real friends would want each other to be happy, and that Sarah's reaction proved she cared more about control than about anyone's actual well-being. She said if their friendship couldn't survive her finding love with a good person, then maybe it wasn't worth preserving. Sarah was stunned into silence by Jenna's passionate defense of our relationship. The crowd of onlookers seemed to shift in our favor as they processed what Jenna had said. Her honesty and vulnerability made it clear that this wasn't some casual rebound or revenge plot. After a long moment, Sarah said that Jenna had made her choice and would have to live with the consequences. She said their friendship was over and that she hoped we'd be happy together since we'd destroyed everything else to get there. Sarah gathered her things and left the party with her girlfriends, making dramatic statements about loyalty and betrayal as she walked out. The remaining guests were left to process what had just happened and figure out how to salvage what was left of the evening. The aftermath of the party confrontation was intense, but ultimately clarifying. Word spread quickly through our friend group about what had happened, and people started taking sides. Some thought Sarah had been unreasonable and cruel, while others felt like Jenna and I had moved too fast and should have been more considerate of Sarah's feelings. In the days following the party, I got calls and texts from various friends wanting to hear my version of events. I was honest about how my relationship with Jenna had developed and emphasized that nothing physical had happened while I was still with Sarah. Most people seemed to understand and were supportive once they heard the full story. Jenna lost a few friends who felt she'd violated some unwritten rule about dating friends' exes, but she said she didn't regret her choice. She told me that anyone who would judge her for finding happiness with a good person wasn't really her friend anyway. Her confidence and conviction helped me feel more secure about our relationship. Sarah continued posting cryptic messages on social media about betrayal and fake friends, but the drama gradually died down as people moved on to other topics. A few mutual friends tried to play peacemaker and suggested we all sit down and talk things through, but Sarah refused to participate in any mediation efforts. The experience actually brought Jenna and me closer together. Going through that public confrontation and having to defend our relationship made us both more certain about our feelings. We'd been tested by drama and criticism, and we'd come out stronger on the other side. About 2 weeks after the party, we ran into Sarah at a restaurant downtown. She was with a new guy who looked like the complete opposite of me, leather jacket, motorcycle, the whole bad boy aesthetic. She made a point of being overly affectionate with him when she saw us, clearly trying to prove she'd moved on to someone more exciting. Jenna and I just nodded politely and went about our evening. We didn't engage with the drama or try to prove anything to Sarah. We were confident in our relationship and didn't need external validation or revenge to feel good about our choices. The incident confirmed that we'd made the right decision to be open about our relationship. Hiding and sneaking around had been stressful and unsustainable. Being honest about our feelings, even when it caused temporary drama, had ultimately led to a stronger and more authentic connection. Looking back, I realized that Sarah's accusation about me being boring had been more about her own restlessness and need for constant stimulation than about any real deficiency in my character. Jenna appreciated qualities in me that Sarah had taken for granted, which proved that compatibility was more important than trying to be someone you're not. Epilogue. 6 months later, Jenna and I are still together and stronger than ever. We ended up keeping most of our mutual friends, though the group dynamic definitely shifted after all the drama. Sarah moved to a different city for a new job, which eliminated most of the ongoing tension and awkwardness. We occasionally hear updates about Sarah through mutual friends, and it sounds like she's doing well in her new life. She's dating someone who matches her energy level and sense of adventure, which honestly seems like a better fit for her personality. I hold no grudges and hope she's found what she was looking for. Jenna and I have talked about marriage and are planning to move in together next month. She still tells me regularly how much she appreciates my thoughtfulness and reliability, the same qualities Sarah found boring. It's amazing how different relationships can bring out different aspects of your personality. The whole experience taught me that being called boring by the wrong person doesn't make you boring. It just means you're incompatible with that particular person. Finding someone who values your authentic self is worth more than trying to change yourself to please someone who doesn't appreciate you. We still laugh about how dramatic that party confrontation was, but we're grateful it happened. It forced us to be honest about our feelings and cleared the air in a way that prolonged secrecy never could have. Sometimes the most difficult conversations lead to the best outcomes.